All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Ben Heller, and I'm here with my friend John Sculley. And John, we've known each other for a long time. It's always great talking with you. And I thought today that we would do three things with John Sculley, where we just talk about three things. We came up with a few questions, and I would love to hear your opinion about them and just catch up, have a good time. Sound good to you?
Absolutely, Ben. You always leave me smarter than you found me, so that's good.
It's mighty kind of you. So, first question. Oh, that didn't sound right. There we go. That's the bell I like. With all the changes going on, what are the implications for the mobility marketplace and the future shape of the service industry?
Oh, well, a favorite topic of mine, but I think what we're going to see is a smarter, slicker, stronger industry on the backside, but there may be some pain in getting to there, but I think the marketplace is going to drive much more consolidation. I think that will make the lead providers have more reach and more product breadth and more capacity and resources than we've really ever seen in our industry before. So while individual circumstances might be dicey through the course of that, I think ultimately the industry would be better prepared to serve the much more demanding marketplace we're going to have on the backside of the current circumstances.
Yeah, I agree with you. I I saw a little of this like I mean it's been happening in other industries obviously for years, but we've been pretty insulated. The largest sort of tipping point that really I think drove a lot of consolidation was the military single source initiative for household goods that we saw, and they wanted a behemoth that didn't exist,
Yeah.
and they awarded it to one party. That was taken back. Now it was delayed. Now who knows if it's actually going to happen, but I think that has started the conversations. And also there's outside money. I think that you look at, there's a ton of SPACs happening, there's a ton of venture capital out there, and they're looking for industries that are highly fragmented to go in and consolidate. And we're in this product era where you're seeing technology capable of doing amazing things, but it is really hard and expensive to build those products. But I think they're coming for our industry. And so I would not be surprised to see now that COVID is all right, like we're past where things are happening again. People can have reasonable valuations based upon like revenues that are not like 30-40% of what was last year. I think you're right. I think we're going to see a lot of activity in our industry over the next 12, 18 months.
Yeah, and I'm pretty bullish about that new money, Ben. I think this is not an adversarial thing. I think that new money is looking for the visionary expertise from within the industry that's been waiting for the rocket fuel to get them to the next level. So I think the partnership of new outside money and internal visionary is going to be what creates that next generation of provider.
Aligned. Next question. How do you expect the behavior of corporate buyers to change with all the changes that have happened over the past 12 months? And how should it change?
Well, I think what's widely reported right now is a lot of inertia on the corporate buyer side, some of it purely due to the distraction and new priorities that all of the COVID circumstances created for HR, all the staffing and policy and safety protocols and everything else that's been required, let alone work from home and all these other changes in the employment situation. But I think where mobility is going to need to go, uh, and we're probably a year or more away from this fully ripening, but I I believe that corporations are going to have to really reassess their ongoing needs for mobility. And it won't be sufficient simply to have a good handle on what your historical needs have been, but rather to take a fresh look at how, in this new employment circumstance, mobility is going to play a role. I think mobility, for one thing, is finally going to be the more strategic partner it's always aspired to be within the talent attraction and talent retention world, because it's going to be an essential part of how key talent gets recruited going forward. So I think that's an elevation of the mobility function.
Mhm.
But I think for the most part, companies are going to have to do a much better job of reaching out to their various internal constituents to understand not just volume and footprint, but the nature of people who will be moved and what the objectives from a business standpoint are going to be for those constituents. So I think
Yeah.
it looks very different going forward.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. Excuse me.
That's a good
um,
day for me when you agree with
well,
most of it.
I think that there's a bigger thing happening to HR, in overall people strategy is changing rapidly at companies, and the goalpost is moving. Even the largest of the large companies out there are trying to figure out, okay, what happens when we want people to come back 5 days a week into the office, and if
They don't want
15% of
to.
our people quit as a result of that, how do we deal with that? So
Yeah.
HR, I think, has bigger challenges to deal with and address than mobility. Mobility, I see, as a subset of their people strategy, which is get the right people in the right place at the right time. And mobility is one of maybe 4 or 5 different strategies to achieve that. So I think that the buyers right now are really focused on larger strategic challenges. And so my gut expectation is that we're not going to see a lot of changes like in our industry this year. I think most of it's going to be 22, 23.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a really interesting change because their strategy has changed how they use mobility. And I would expect delocation becomes a much more commonly used word in our industry. But that's just my opinion. I could be wrong.
Well, as we all could be, but while I agree with you that mobility has historically been kind of relegated to the implementer side of things and not really part of strategy, I think it will have an elevated role because of the pressure on talent acquisition and new key leadership, where mobility is going to be one of the arrows in the quiver to make that happen. And I think that's where the elevation of this function comes from.
Great way to end it. Next question. We're going to call this question, and furthermore. You watched Paul and I talk about RFPs and the top 5 reasons mobility RFPs are broken. What are the top other ways that you think that you see in your experience consulting mobility RFPs are broken?
Well, first off, I loved what you and Paul had to say. So it was a stimulant, like a big mug of coffee, to listen to you two, because it gets me going on one of my favorite topics.
I'm a
I
positive charge.
Oh, absolutely. Because you're right, it is broken in so many ways, and there are so many bad practices that are prevalent in the RFP space. I think some of the things that came to my mind, in addition to all the excellent points you two made, are that I do believe RFPs have an important place, uh, and RFIs are a legitimate companion to the RFP. But I like to use an RFI as an objective or quantitative screening device, uh, without qualitative judgments, that you can put out to a broader list of companies to get down to a select few who meet all of your absolute requirements in order to go forward with an RFP. So that's the role I see for an RFI. I also didn't hear you directly address uh, what I believe is important in terms of building in qualitative or cultural factors into the evaluation of the providers. Often it's the informal thumb on the scale or the afterthought that goes into a provider selection. I believe it can be part of your express criteria, with its own weight, with its own value, and with its own measurement steps along the course of an evaluation process. So I would like to see more attention paid to the qualitative side and baked into the decision models that companies use. And one last one, I think where many companies go astray is they grab the quick, expedient, uh, hand-me-down RFP, add some of their own to it, and out they go. And I think where they give short shrift to the RFP process is not doing enough homework on their own internal business needs and requirements. I think too often buyers come to the services market without a clear sense of what it is they want to buy. And the only way to do that is to be fully in touch with your constituents and their projected needs going forward. And companies that don't do that waste a lot of everybody's time and money by asking more questions they need on topics that are not going to be important in the ultimate decision, simply because they haven't cut down the number of scenarios that an RFP needs to address. So I think having the buyer do their homework better and be more disciplined about what they ask and what they evaluate is in everybody's best interest. And I'd love to see it go that way.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said.
Yes.
I think that especially like that, I think that there can be a lot of standardization in RFPs for 80% of it.
Okay.
And then that last 20% really needs to be customized. And I agree with you also that we need to over index and spend a lot of energy upfront communicating. And most RFPs, even ones that I ran back in the day, I don't think that knowing what I know now, I did not help clients adequately communicate who they were, what the vision was, what the importance was. In fact, in many of the RFPs, I was looking for the RMC to advise us and give us basically free consulting on what we should be doing. But that to me, those are conversations that should have taken place 6 months before we released an RFP.
Yeah.
And now we create the vision and articulate what we want in that RFP. But so I agree with you on that. And then for the RFI, I think that my opinion on it is that if you're working with a John Sculley or a Paul Barnes or a Ben Heller went back in the day when I was at Accenture, like we have done a lot of these RFPs historically. We know the answers that we're going to get back. If you're looking for a tri-regional company, well, we know which ones aren't tri-regional. We
Sure.
should just be able to remove them. So I found a lot of time and energy wasted in that regard. And one other thing that I think that we talked about last time was every single question that goes in there has a cost associated with it. And the more often than not, we are seeing too many questions being asked,
Yeah.
which dilute the attention to those questions that are really impactful. So anyway, why don't we end it there? John, it's always a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for joining me today. And you would like to reach out to people can you tell them what your email address is and LinkedIn situation?
Sure, of course I can. Well, my email address is John Sculley, no punctuation, JOHNSCULLEY at rismedia.com.
Great. And if you ever need any consulting help, this is a great man to talk to. But hope you're all doing well. Thanks for watching today and look forward to connecting soon. Thanks
Thanks,
again,
Ben.
John.
My
Cheers.
pleasure. Bye.